Hey everyone, this is George Couros with a solo episode of the Innovators Mindset Podcast. I've really been enjoying kind of just doing a weekly every Thursday, whether it's answering questions, just sharing some thoughts, sharing some strategies with you all, just kind of having some talk because it gives me a good way to reflect on some of the work that I'm doing and hopefully share some ideas with you all today. And there's two objectives that I have. I'm writing the objectives on the board right now that I want for this podcast today to hopefully help people or just maybe spark some conversations. And the first one is really some of the ways I'm using artificial intelligence to really kind of try to elevate professional learning and model some of the things that I'm doing to hopefully encourage teachers to think about how they could use it in their classrooms, but also thinking about the question of distraction with the use of technology in our classrooms. I think it's a really important question. And so there's a reason I'm talking about these two things, kind of see it as I progress through the podcast. Yesterday, I was with Atlanta Public Schools working with their gifted educator program. And it was something I really, really enjoyed doing and really kind of pushing thinking. And one of the very first things I said to them, and this is in all honesty, not just with gifted programs, it's all the organizations, all the schools, all the teachers I work with, is that I'm not the expert on the work that you're doing. And that's not why I'm here. And in fact, I would actually say you're the expert and I'm just someone sharing some learning with you. And basically what I hope is that you take some of the ideas that I shared today and you mold them and make them to what you want them to be. Because we often actually decide PD, how effective it is based on, do we have a bunch of stuff to do the next day with our students? And I joke about this, but it's pretty accurate that there's no group of people who wants to be told exactly what to do the next day who also hates being told what to do. It's like, tell me exactly what to do tomorrow, but also don't you dare tell me what to do. And that's not my focus at all. And I think that kind of alleviates some pressure, not only myself, but on the group is that, hey, this isn't a bunch of stuff that we can just check off tomorrow, but really kind of empowering us to find our own ways to success because nobody knows their kids better than the teachers. Nobody knows their community better than that staff. So for me to come in and say, if you do these things, you'll fix all your problems is not realistic. And I kind of default to that. I'm just sharing some of my learning. And I try some things just kind of on the fly. I'll think of something. I'm like, hey, I want to try this. And I'm very open. Like, hey, this is maybe the first time I'm trying this. I've tried this a couple of times because I do want to learn with that group and challenge my thinking. So we were talking about ways we can use technology, artificial intelligence, ChatGPT to kind of bring people together. And one of the things that I did yesterday was something I've never done before was we had group discussions and they would share some insights. But when they were sharing their insights, like how you go around table to table, a lot of times people will write on a gigantic piece of paper. And what happens to that paper, right? It either goes in the garbage or someone spends hours and hours trying to collect that information. So what I did is I asked them to share some ideas based on what they were discussing at their table, but I actually went and gave them my phone with the voice to text feature on ChatGPT. And I would go to each group. I'd basically actually just ask them to speak into my phone while they're sharing with everyone else. And what was fascinating, it captured on ChatGPT all of their answers. And then I just submitted it. And then I asked the questions to summarize it so I could just send it to the group. And so it wasn't hours. It was literally a couple seconds of an email to get them to see what they had shared, but also to give them some summaries, some things. And I actually said, hey, give me some lesson plans or ideas based on this feedback on how we can actually achieve what we discussed. And it was something I've never done before, but it was just such a really easy idea and really kind of pushed my thinking on how we can use these things to just maybe capture, but summarize and saves us a lot of time to do some, better focusing on conversation. The other thing I did, and I've been doing this for a while, but I've been kind of molding this as it's going. I actually will share and talk and share some ideas with people, but instead of them actually having discussions right away, I will encourage them to, do a reflection piece in simply a Google form. And it's really simple. I tell them that just heads up that everyone's going to see what you're writing. So just be thoughtful of that. I think that you have to tell people that ahead of time, which is interesting because when you tell people that, they're not just thoughtful of what they share online. If they share something negative about someone, they're going to see it, blah, blah, blah. But knowing someone else is going to see your stuff makes you put more thought into it. And if we put more thought into what we're learning at Professional Learning Day, that's never a bad thing. So I think that was something that I've always done. But lately what I've been doing is taking all of their questions. Like, one of the questions I ask is like, what questions do you have, or what's something that's challenging you? And people ask questions and share that. And then I will take all of those questions and copy them, paste them into ChatGPT or whatever app similar to that you're utilizing. And then I'll just say, hey, basically take these questions and summarize them into 3 simple group discussion questions. So they'll do that. It will do that. And then basically that's where the group discussion questions, how can I actually decide discussion questions for a group that I've never met, never talked to before? And now they're actually having discussions based on what their questions are, or at least summaries of that as well. It's such a simple way to leverage this. And how could you use that with your classroom, right? So like, what are the questions your students are asking? Gather them all. Hey, here's like basically these questions summarized in 3. Because a lot of times the questions, they're not exactly the same, but they have similarities. And so many people are trying to solve some of the same problems, especially in organizations, especially in classrooms. So it's really interesting. So just a couple ways that I use this, but I also go through the questions and say, is there something I can answer really quickly that I can see there's a pattern here, but also give some insights, some feedback. And one of the questions that was shared is this one: how to keep students' attention at a time where there are so many distractions, which is something we often face with. And I wanted to give some of my perspectives on this as well. And to the full credit, I do this all the time. I don't just like see the question. I actually will give the mic over and say, hey, give me some context, give me some, and I try to get in a conversation with them. And I asked the teacher, she was awesome. She was incredible. And like, I really appreciate this because I understand, like, it's really easy when you have access to all of these things, how distracted we become. So I shared with her, or asked her the question, once she kind of dug into it. I said, did you check your email or any of your personal texts while I was presenting, while you're here at this Professional Learning Day? And she not only said, yeah, she's like, yeah, I did some grading too, which I thought was amazing, right? And I asked her, I said, do you think I actually care? And she said, no, I can tell you don't. And I said, it's not, and I think you've obviously, based on your questions, based on your insights, there's something you gained out of this, but there's times where you checked out, you maybe did something else. So my standard is not necessarily do you actually pay attention to me 100% of the time during this process. My standard is like, I want you to be way better because of today, because of the work that we're doing. And I'm okay, because sometimes, I'm gonna be honest with you, I check out of things because you can only hold my attention for so long. And I don't think that's the worst thing, but I think I do pretty good work. And sometimes I think the checking out allows me to check back in. But if you just try to hold my attention, I might be looking at you, but I'm not paying attention. So I think that was something, and it's funny, and I appreciate that she admitted that. And I think a lot of times what happens is in schools, we basically say like, hey, we're going to like ban these, get rid of this. Nobody's allowed to use this. And we take away opportunities from kids who would benefit. And this is an example that what I use all the time is that probably many of you listening to this have worked with kids who, when they have headphones on in the music, they are the most locked in students you have ever met. They can they'll write novels. It's just amazing. And I actually listen to music quite a bit, and it's not to actually get my attention away from it. It's actually to block out other distractions. And I couldn't tell you what I was listening to, but it's actually a good way. I like to see people, but it's a way for me to kind of be in a space. So we know there's that kid, right? But I also say, do you know the kid who has headphones on and does nothing and is totally distracted? And so what happens is we get frustrated with that kid, that we say nobody could actually utilize this, where we should actually see, well, this benefits this kid, and then this actually hurts this kid. And if the kid says, well, that's not fair, it's like, well, the standard is we want everyone to do their best, and that's not putting you in a situation. That's the fairness that we're looking for. How do we put you in a situation where you excel in what you're doing? And I think that's where we start to struggle. And the other conversation that we had that day, and I think it is important, is sometimes the expectation is more what makes us feel good as opposed to what are kids learning. So I've done this before. Eyes up here, eyes up here, eyes up here, right? And I will tell you that I struggle with hearing in my right ear. So a lot of times when I'm listening, I won't actually look at you directly. I'll actually look off to the side because that's me paying attention. Whereas if I'm looking at you directly, I might not be listening. I might not be listening to anything you're saying. And I'm just kind of staring blankly and I don't really know what's going on. And so when we say eyes up here, sometimes that is actually more about how that makes us feel when we are teaching than necessarily how someone is actually processing information or how they actually learn. The other thing that we have to kind of consider with that is that sometimes we ask for eye contact. In some cultures, that is one of the most disrespectful things that you can do is actually give eye contact to somebody. So that's something that you have to think about, is that maybe what is comfortable for you actually is a sign of disrespect in certain cultures. So is the focus more on our teaching or how kids are learning? And one of the things I talked about is if you have flexible seating in your classrooms and you have, for example, couches and chairs, as a kid, I would have went to the couch immediately, but I would have learned nothing. I would have done nothing. I'd been super relaxed, chill, wouldn't pay attention. So it's not just letting kids do whatever they do. It's kind of helping them figure out what works best, because you know what works really good for me? A high table, because I like to sit up, sit down. I like to fidget. But it helps kind of my brain. Whereas if I'm on a couch, I'm like chill, I'm relaxed. So it's not let the kids do whatever they want. It's like what helps them. So, hey, hey, George, you know what? Maybe couch is not for you because you don't seem to be really doing much. It's not really helping your learning. Maybe try this, try over here. Does that actually help, my brain? So I think part of it too is that when we're focused on, are we more concerned about distraction, or is it more our perception of what maybe someone is actually doing? Just kind of off the cuff, I remember one time I actually, as a teacher, I actually think I was an assistant principal at the time. I got in trouble at a professional learning day because I was on my computer while the presenter was speaking. And she came up to me and she said, "You need to get off your computer." And I was like, "Why?" And she's like, "Because you're not paying attention." And then I turned my computer around and said, "I'm actually blogging about what you're talking about right now." So it's actually taking her information and actually writing. So I could have been just sitting there and not listening, and that would have made her feel more comfortable in the moment, whereas actually like trying to process what she was talking about and sharing and dig deeper. Now, you might not agree with that. You might not feel comfortable, but I feel that if I'm actually writing something and trying to really dig deep into what you're saying, I'll actually have better learning than just kind of sitting there. That's me. And I think that's where we have to have the conversation. What is actually the deeper learning? What are we trying to achieve? So one of the things I pointed out in this conversation is when I walked in, I started speaking, I encouraged people to use a hashtag. I gave them my handle on different social media apps, and I encouraged them to share their learning. And the reason, and I talked about that, do we create an environment where people know their contributions matter? So typically when you have someone doing, presentations, they're doing workshops, it's like, can we put our devices away? And again, is that more about the comfort of the presenter or more about the group? And sometimes it's kind of like saying, I'm the only one who can actually share anything. Whereas I'm actually saying, I think the whole space is better when we all share. And I would love to learn from you during this process as well. So what I kind of focus on, am I using technology in two ways? One, does it bring people together? And two, does it deepen learning? And if you can actually lead people to that, and I think it really starts with the adults, is like, I think a lot of light bulbs went off yesterday in that group, and hopefully they do often, is I'm trying to get them to model, try to get them to understand and share some of their learning and kind of figure out, is this actually promoting reflection? One of the things we did yesterday, I actually encouraged them to make a video and share something they learned today, and they can either do it by themselves, they can do it in a group, but they have to post it on one of the social media networks using a certain hashtag. And the thing I say that's kind of throws people off is like, there's only one rule for this activity. So you can do it in group, you can do it by yourself, you can do it however, and just make a video reflection of what you're doing. The only rule is I will not help you. I will not help you. If you don't know what you're doing, figure it out. And so people like kind of shocked because typically like, a teacher saying figure it out. But that's sometimes we jump in and try to do too much, but then we actually teach people to be dependent upon us as opposed to kind of knowing they can figure stuff out. So some people will start pressing buttons to see what happens. Some people will look around the room and say, I know that person knows, so I'm going to go ask them for help. And they support. So they learn to depend upon each other as a community. But instead of getting focused on, well, we're posting it on social media, that's not it at all. It is actually, they're now thinking, okay, anyone can see this. and we're all sharing it as a group. What did we actually learn? What's the stuff that, really benefited us? What really helped us? And now they're synthesizing the information going through that process. And so we talked about that because you do have to make it explicit, because some people are like, oh, this is about sharing on Instagram or this is sharing on TikTok. No. It's about actually really thinking about what you learn and having the ability to teach it to others, which makes you understand it in a deeper way. So is that technology necessarily a distraction? If you can focus on how do we use this to connect with one another and how do we use this to deepen learning, it doesn't mean you're going to have 100% attention. It is impossible to get 100% attention. And by the way, before phones, it was impossible to get 100% attention. But to pretend these things don't exist and then not leverage them, if you just see them as a toy, then they're going to be a toy. But if you see it as a really powerful way to leverage and deepen learning, that ability to share with the world, to share with the community, brings us together, that's something I always think about all the time. And last thing I'll share with you, I did the same thing when I worked with a group of students. I've done that all the time, is I encourage them to be thoughtful of this and show them ways they can use this, as opposed to constantly saying, here's what you shouldn't do. And I think a lot of students really appreciate that. And I remember we had a group discussion it was about 50 students. And we're sitting there in a library and talking about all of this stuff. And as we were going through the process, what was really interesting to me, one of the students, we were sitting there for over an hour, she said, you told us at the beginning that we could use our phones. I was so excited about it. And I actually have not looked at my phone the entire time, because it was almost like you saying we could made me not really care to. I wanted to be more in this discussion. And I thought about myself, when you tell me I can't do something, I kind of want to do this. When you for example, block YouTube in schools, what do a lot of kids do? They're not like, oh, YouTube's blocked. They're like, I'm going to figure out how to get to it. And they spend a lot of their time trying to figure out. So I think, as somebody said this one time, I always stuck with me, the best filter that you can provide for students in schools is the filter you help them develop in their heads. And that has always stuck to me. And I think it's really, when we think about this as distraction, as opposed to how do we leverage this, again, to bring people together and deepen learning, there's some really powerful ways we can use this. Anyways, I just want to share some of my reflections from yesterday, some of the work that I do in my sessions. Really great conversations. And by the way, if you're like, this guy's for phones, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that we have to have conversations about this and think, how do we use this? I'm totally fine when it's, hey, let's put this away. That's okay too. But are there ways we can leverage this to actually ensure that every student finds that pathway to success that is meaningful to them? And how you learn and how I learn can be totally different. Do we actually leverage those things, or do we just try to make everyone learn exactly the same, which has never worked in all of history, right? We have to figure out, we all learn in different ways. There's different ways you can benefit and to leverage that. So just some of my reflections. Thanks for being here. I hope you have a wonderful day. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your ideas. Share them down in the comments down below on YouTube if you're listening. Thanks for being here. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.